Howdy, everybody. Okay, continuing on topic 6, documentation and warnings. In the first subtopic on this, we talked about written information processing and how humans perceive written information, the top-down and bottom-up influences. And for this one, 6.2, we are going to talk about how we design for readability, designing for people to be able to read messages, that are verbal language. All right, so just as a reminder, all of you out there don't represent your average American person or US person in the US or even around the world. People are generally at a lower literacy level than you may wish or you may think. And so we have to design for these people. We're not just designing for, graduate students in a top engineering program. We are designing for humans. And so we want to understand what is their literacy level. And there's a sizable percentage of, adult people in the world that, we may be interacting with and you may need to convey messages to who are functionally illiterate, who don't have a literacy level that you can assume they'll be able to read, even the most basic level stuff. But how can we make sure that we're reaching the most people or the people that we need to? There's a couple of design guidelines here. So this comes from Bailey, 1989. You remember in the first subtopic, I talked about Alphonse Japanis in his HFES president keynote address back in 1965 or around then. And so these are, rules and guidelines that have been repeated for many years. And so, it doesn't go away. The problems with language and human factors needs to design things with written language. There's always going to be a need for that. So Bailey gives these directions, and this is again for reading, for designing material that can be read by the public and receive a message. So this isn't about, enjoyable literature that I'm going to read in the doctor's office or, before bed each night. This is, I've got important instructions I need to convey to you for work purposes, for safety purposes, but I need that information to get into your head through this written documentation. So a few quick guidelines here. So first of all, state what you need the people to know and try to keep it concise and to the point. Don't use excess words. Those of you who are writing for things like word counts, in a lot of conference proceedings and journal articles, it's really a difficult skill to hone, is get my message across simply and with minimal words, but it's a great skill to work on, right? So getting the message across to people, even through technical writing, I'd follow the same instructions. Use familiar vocabulary, so understand who your target audience is and understand, if you can, the expected literacy levels and what are meaningful, terms and vocabulary to them. Use those. Ensure that you are being explicit in instructions, so don't use ambiguous identifiers like it or they. State what you're referring to. Be as clear as you can, so there's no, I wonder what they're referring to here, or misinterpret. When you have multiple points to make, I could have written these points as sentences, in a paragraph form, but what I'm doing here is I'm separating each point I wanted to make. I'm presenting them with numerical, numbered delineators. And so, this helps organize these thoughts in a way I can relay them to you in a step-by-step fashion. And finally, highlighting key points or words. This is about directing attention in a bottom-up or top-down way, ding, 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 in a bottom-up fashion, because highlighted words stand out from the background more so than unhighlighted words. They become more salient. So remember that term that I love so much about bottom-up influences in information processing. How much does this sensory data, or how much do the data in front of me attract my senses, right? How much do they play to the way my senses process? All right, so these 5 good rules of thumb here for designing reading material. Another question. Oh, I'm sorry. This is a great rule of thumb. So if you are designing for, let's just say, the lowest literacy levels, where you might reasonably get information across to as many humans as possible, who based on literacy. This guy, C.K. Ogden, has published a list of words that we refer to as Ogden's Basic English. 850 words are on this list, and I have the full list on Canvas under the source and supplementary materials for this topic. So check that out. You will note, what's on this list. It is, basic types of words, operations, general things, picturable things, qualities, opposite qualities, and very simple words that go in those categories. And the rule is, as much of these words that are on that list as you can use, the more you are making a simple and relatively easy to understand verbal message. And so if you are asked, at some point in your career or for an assignment in this class, if you are asked, hey, design written, documentation or a warning or something to convey information to blank, and blank might include any human, think about that lowest level of literacy and design for them. And this is a pretty great source to consult. So in addition to what sorts of words do we use and how readable are the words, we also have to think about the overall size of some documentation, the overall reading load that's expected. And so this is where, for the engineering perspective, we really need to say we're separating the key pieces of information. You need to know this to do the task or to do it effectively or to do it safely. There are some other details here, but I'm going to separate those details, which are nice to know. I'd be great if I knew those, but what do I need to know to do my task right now? I want to keep those separate so that, almost like a executive summary, I've got, the main points are going to get across to me with my simplest first pass sort of reading. Then, yeah, I can go to Appendix G and read more, about why that is, but what do I need to do? Let's get that concise and right up front, okay? So again, we're not talking about what I'm going to read when I'm, hanging out waiting for the doctor's office, enjoyable reading literature. This is, I need to get the information into the brain of the person that I'm interfacing with. So what does the operator need to know to perform the job safely and effectively? And in that question of how much, there is a different world where it looks like this. And so this is probably familiar to everybody to some extent, if not iTunes or some other, Apple World product. You've seen one of these software license agreements, terms and conditions. And I would venture that almost nobody, or I would venture nobody who is watching this video right now has ever taken one of these and read every single word in it and thought about it, as if they were reading material that they were needing to absorb. And that's because, or at least, according to my assumption, this in front of us right here is not written language intended to convey a message to somebody. Okay, so I'm a user, I'm a user of this software. So what am I as a user getting into? I could read this to find out. I'm not gonna, right? Humans aren't, users are not going to do that if I'm not required to, if I think I can figure it out otherwise. The reason that this is presented here is much more so for Apple, for iTunes, and a cover your butt, CYA, sort of situation. So this is legalese meant for if I hurt myself trying to eat my iPad, right? Or or whatever. And so then when I go to sue Apple, they can say, oh, but you clicked okay, you clicked that you agree you wouldn't eat it. Somewhere in this documentation, there's going to be some legalese that can be used to interpret, my poor behavior with that product. So again, this is not written language. I would argue this is not even designed to be read by the people who it's interfacing with. It's designed to be a wall of words where there's a lot of legalese in there, but we're trusting in our own selves that there's not anything nefarious in there, and we're not going to spend our time and energy processing all this because we're not expecting much information to come from it. So I'm just going to click agree, and I'm going to go on. And again, I can see a whole bunch of words here in front of me. I am not reading them and processing them. That's not typically what this sort of a presentation or this sort of agreement would really be seeking here. This is more cover your butt. All right. So which words do we use? How many words do we use? We have to start with the assumption we are trying to convey a message to a human and not using words for some other purpose, like, to protect ourselves from litigation. Okay, good news. So we're going to do a little bit of math here, very simple things, but there are a couple of formulas that you can use to determine, to estimate at least if you have some written material, either you've created it or you're interested in how readable it is. Microsoft Word has functionality to calculate readability metrics for us. And there are a number of different readability metrics. I've chosen 3 of them here to show you. The first one, the Gunning Fog Index, is something I like it because it's relatively simple in the math that goes into it. And it's something you could use, without having to take too many notes. Like you could count words, do a little mental math, and come up with an answer that roughly illustrates what level of school in the United States education system would prepare a student to be able to understand this, to read and understand it. So what we see here, this readability statistic, when it says this grade level, the Flesch-Kincaid grade level, Gunning Fog Index and Flesch-Kincaid grade level, both return a grade in the US educational system. So this 15.0, what that means is a 15th year of school. If you think of through 12th grade as, what most Americans would complete in their primary school, and then I go away to college and I do 3 more years, and my junior year in my engineering program or whatever, secondary school, that's where I might anticipate that, hey, this is appropriate for reading at that level. Okay, so Gunning Fog Index, the Flesch Reading Ease score is also one that's very, very common. The 2 Flesch ones that are reported by Microsoft Word, these are probably the 2 most commonly referred to or accessed, but there are other ones out there. Okay, so first let's do the Gunning Fog, because this is our simple mental math one. So here's how you do it. First, whatever you're trying to score, you take a sample of about 100 words. So it's not the whole thing. It's not a whole textbook. It's not the whole article. I'm going to randomly sample a section of about 100 words, a couple paragraphs. Okay. Calculate in that the average number of words per sentence. Okay. Count the words, count the sentences, divide one by the other, count the number of what we're calling complex words. And so a word is complex if it has at least 3 syllables. And then we exclude things that are like, proper nouns, like, let's see, my name, if I had if my last name was like Fergalus, 1, 2, 3, so I have 3 syllables or more, that might start to be complex, except I'm a proper noun, so it would be exceptioned in this case. So familiar jargon or compound words are also excluded. And this is all you need. You need just to count those 2 things, and then you plug into our equation here. So approximate grade level in the US education system is 0.4 multiplied by the rest of this. So note, I've got brackets here and here. So it's 0.4 times all this. And then we do the sum of the words per sentence and 100 times the ratio of complex words to overall number of words. So let's do an example here. So Rockabye Baby on the Treetop. This is a poem or a folk song. This is the entirety of that song or poem. It's all here. So if we were to 1, 2, 3 count the words and look at things like this, would be a compound word. Rockabye is 1 word, but I'm going to say it's not complex because it's compound. Okay. So 31 total words, 4 sentences here, and 0 complex words. None of them are 3 syllables or more and not a proper noun or a compound word or familiar jargon. So that's all I need, those 3 numbers to plug into my equation. And what do I get? 3.1. So I interpret this as somebody in the US education system who has completed at least grade level 3 or is at least in grade level 3 should be able to read and understand this verbiage, okay, this written documentation. All right. Now, if we had a different term or a different sample here, like the Wikipedia sample of logorrhea, I think that's probably how you pronounce this word. And what I've done here is I've italicized all of the words that I would call complex, so 3 syllables or more, and not compound, etc. What do we get? 86 words. There are 3 sentences and 11 complex words. Put those into my equation, and I get a 16.6. So this is, if 12 is senior year in high school, the last year of primary school in the US, this means 4 years beyond that is when this is acceptable. So yeah, that kind of makes sense. If I look at this, I'm thinking, I can barely really make sense of this reading. So even myself, I'm probably about here as a reading level. And yeah, so I hope you can see how this is somewhat more difficult to read and understand than Rockabye Baby. Okay, so that's the gunning fog index. You can do the simple math. Hopefully it's a rule of thumb thing. And then things get a lot more precise and a little I don't know where these constants come from. So 84.6 is a very empirically derived, very precise number. 206.835, that's weird. So what you also need to know for this one is the number of syllables in each word, and then get the average of those syllables per word and average sentence length in words. So this is meant to be applied to an entire body of text, not a sample like with the gunning fog index. Some of you may know this book. Some of you maybe have read it. Some of you maybe have read it in the last week, to usually younger people. If you don't know about this book, what's interesting about it? So Dr. Seuss, the famous poet and children's book author, he accepted a bet from his publisher, which was, I bet I can write a book that will sell well, and this book sells extremely well, where I only use 50 total words, or only 50 words total are represented in this book. Okay, so these are those 50 words, and you won't find another word in Green Eggs and Ham that isn't one of these 50. But if you then apply our flesh reading ease formula just like this to Green Eggs and Ham, we get 1.02 syllables per word, 5.7 words per sentence, and we plug all that in there, and we get this score, 114.8. So a couple things here. First of all, we are not really sure what this means. 114.8 is not easily linkable to, well, is that easy or hard? Here, you're going to need some sort of table probably to interpret it. So 114. So we're above 100. And so, well above 100 means, I suppose, well under 10 years old should be able to read this. And as those scores get smaller, this is essentially saying it's harder and harder to read. The readability is more challenging. Okay. So the flesh reading ease score really, empirically, very well followed, can calculate this automatically in Microsoft Word, which I'll show you how in a moment. Oh, let's do it now. So yes, we can do this in Microsoft Word. So not only using the equation, definitely I would recommend checking this out. I have, hey, just go to the support page here, and that's the link for how do I do this. Because depending on the version of Microsoft Word you have, there are a lot of different ways to do it. So, older versions of Office, I've been doing readability statistics on about like 5 or 6 different versions of Office in my time here at A&M. Also, some of you who have Mac, system, there's going to be different instructions. But let me show you how I would do this. So I have here in front of us the logorrhea, the same the same script that we used, to evaluate the Gunning Fog Index, and Gunning Fog told us we need to be a senior in college to understand it. So let's compare that with what the Flesch Reading Ease score gives us. Okay, so a couple things that you would do here. So first of all, in this version of Word, which I think is Microsoft 360, is whatever Texas A&M has currently in 2023. It's I think it might be Microsoft 365, but I'm not sure. Any case, we go to, in this one, review, and spelling and grammar is where we need to go. And now you have to go through all of the words you misspelled or are not, or aren't in the dictionary for Microsoft Word. And I'm just going to click ignore because I know that's correct. There is going to be some language where I use passive voices. These are also things Microsoft Word doesn't like. It's a little bit harder to understand a sentence that's written in a passive voice. So ways to turn this around. I'm going to ignore it for now. And then what do I get? We've finished. Good. Let's check the rest. And there we go. Then it gives me my readability once I've gone through that spelling and grammar check. So down here are my scores. I do have a third of my sentences are passive, so maybe we need to change that. But my Flesch Reading Ease 38. And let's go back to our table, Flesch Reading Ease of 38. So we're in the difficult range. We're not exactly in the 16 senior in college range. And in fact, what you see here, the Flesch-Kincaid grade level, this is sort of the grade level interpretation of the Flesch Reading Ease score. So this one tells us a grade of 15, which is essentially junior year in college. So Gunning Fog Index says you should probably be a senior to understand this in terms of readability. Flesch-Kincaid grade level says 15 is an acceptable level for understanding Logorrhea. Okay, so you can check that out for yourself. And I will note that there may be a case or time where you need to design something for, let's say, a class like this one, and maybe a certain readability level is required, in order to reach your target audience. And so this would be a good way to check. And I would probably refer to the Flesch-Kincaid grade level that Microsoft Word gives us, because that's going to be your best combination of a really well-practiced readability index, and you can get it from Microsoft Word really fast. So one of the reasons I do this routinely is because Texas A&M's Institutional Review Board, which is the organization that reviews any plans for research being done at Texas A&M. So then when they approve it, anybody who's participating in the research, the human subjects research, know that it's been reviewed and it's got these basic properties of being, there are risks accounted for, and it's voluntary, and I can leave anytime I need to and everything. And one of the requirements is that there's a full description of here's everything you're going to be getting yourself into, called a consent form or a consent document. So anytime we do a research study with human subjects experiment, human subjects, those humans will need to read one of these and then decide, am I going to do this or not? And if they are, they sign it and we go from there. But it's really important that here's the document of everything we're going to do to you and the risks you're going to experience and the potential benefits and et cetera. That has to be readable. That has to be understood by your target audience. And so you'll note this, please provide the readability statistics for each informed consent document at the Flesch-Kincaid grade level. And note this, in general, informed consent for adults should be on an 8th grade level. So I need to write a consent form. If I'm going for any adult, out there, as opposed to specifically, smart engineers or smart people at Texas A&M, but any adult, then I want my reading level to be at 8th grade or below. Note, I did my Microsoft Word readability procedure I just showed you, and I got a 12.3 for this human subjects document. So that means you need to basically have completed high school to reasonably understand what's in this piece of paper. And I argue, and then the IRB agrees with me, that, hey, well, we're recruiting Texas A&M students. They are admitted and currently enrolled in Texas A&M, so we can make certain assumptions about their readability, their ability to their literacy levels. So I think it's reasonable to assume that any of our potential participants are reading at least a 12th grade level. That's what I've put in my applications, and that seems to be acceptable to our IRB. So yes, so we do need to look up these metrics sometimes. Sometimes it matters to know, how much of the population of our target audience will be able to read and understand what we're throwing at them. Okay, and that's it for this topic. Tune in next time.